Can you at least watch and like? Hey, what's up? What's up, family? This is Real Talk with ZSJ every Thursday night at 8 p.m. right here on this YouTube channel. I think I'm actually going to change to Wednesday nights next week. I don't know, but I think I am. Or maybe the week after, because I already have a guest for next week. But anyway, I'm excited to welcome Sister Catherine. Do you just go by Cat?
Cat is fine, yes.
Cat is fine. So let me just tell y'all, let the audience know, like I've been following the sister for a minute on Twitter, and I absolutely love her writings and I love her tweets. So I'm like, I just vibe with this sister. Like we are vibing. So when this whole hashtag went viral last week, which I'm assuming we're gonna get into it, but I'm assuming it was because of Harry and all of that. Black women actually made a hashtag called "Give White Men a Chance" go viral on Twitter. And I'm just like, oh my God, what are sisters that think like me at? So I reached out. I reached out to you. I'm like, girl, let's talk about this. But I'm thinking about there's a bunch that I want to talk to you about. Anyway, girl, welcome. Introduce yourself.
Hi. So I'm very excited to be here. I'm very nervous. So if this
it's all good
at times, excuse me, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me. So I'm a blogger, a Black girl blogger, enthusiastic about Black culture, Black intellectualism, all things Black. So that's my vibe.
Yes, that's us, girl. That's what I say. That's why I'm vibing with you. And I actually started reading your writings maybe about 3 or 4 years ago. You've been blogging for a minute, right?
Yes.
Exactly. That's how I knew who you was. I'm like, man, because I actually read your writing. A brother actually shared it on Facebook. This was a couple years ago. And then in your bio, you had your Twitter handle. So that's when I started following you on Twitter. But anyway, for all the audience, make sure y'all if you're not subscribed to this channel, subscribe, but also please share this video on your platforms, because this is going to be a very fun conversation. So just tell me, what was your thoughts when you found out that this hashtag went viral on Twitter?
To be honest, something told me not to click it, because I knew if I clicked it, it was going to be a trigger. So when I actually clicked it, it was much more disturbing, surprisingly, than I actually anticipated, because a lot of the tweets wasn't just word content, it was actual visuals. So you had people using it as a testimony to kind of their own personal white savior figure, which was even more disturbing. And I just really showed that I think the Meghan and Harry interview was generating all the wrong conversations, and had just really,
I saw you said that.
Not only, I don't want to say that it flew over someone's head, but the idea that this became an opportunity to try to uplift white men as this kind of avenue for change, it was just really disturbing.
Yeah, it was really disturbing to me too. And, my thoughts are okay, there are some real people on Twitter. There's a lot of bots too. Cause sometimes when you click on these platforms, they got 70 followers, 20 followers. They ain't following nobody. You know what I'm saying? It's just okay, so this is some, COINTELPRO type of. Wow. Can you hear me?
Yes, now
can
I can.
You hear me?
Now, yes, I can.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure what happened. I saw my feed went out. But anyway, when I clicked on it, I couldn't stay on very long. I couldn't follow it. You know what I mean? I'm just but I wanted to have this conversation, because I feel there's a lot of that out there. And I've had conversations with other people, just about what I see on Twitter for a very long time. So I've actually technically had a Twitter handle since 2009, but I was hardly ever on there. I hated Twitter because I was just how in the world how do people like this? You know what I mean? You can only do so many characters, and I hated it. And I'm a long-winded person. So I built my huge following on Facebook. You know what I'm saying? So I have almost 5,000 friends, but I'm very selective, but I have 1,000 people waiting. You know what I mean? So I built more of my platform, but if I had known what I know now back then, I probably would have like staying on Twitter. I probably have a bunch of more followers now and all that stuff. But one of the things that I hate about it now is that it's so toxic, and it's a lot of, I guess you want to call them Black liberals or whatever. I mean, they're just really, a lot of them seem like they have gotten a lot of their anti-Black ideas from the academy. What do you think about that? What's your assessment? Because I know you're on there and like you got a ton of followers, like you got a whole like thing, like people know who you are. What's your thoughts on that?
I guess for me, I've noticed that I've gotten a significant traction in the last few months. So this time last year, I had like 300 followers. Then all of a sudden, when Blackness kind of became cool, then I've gotten a lot more traction on the blog and on Twitter as well, which, is not accidental. So I definitely agree with you with the bots and kind of the mechanical presence behind these so-called Black faces. But I also think it's interesting to meet people like in real life or at events that mirror a lot of the problematic ideologies that we see on Twitter. So especially the war against Black men, which I'm noticing now too, and using Black women, Black female faces as kind of like the ammo against the Black men, as if we can get anywhere without Black men, as if we wouldn't be here without Black men,
right?
Logically or like socially. So the idea that they have us taking part in this genocidal procedure is problematic in itself. And even if the bots started, we do have real people engaging with that also. So taking the bait on that. So if it's okay, we're anti-Black men, then we're going to get people jumping underneath and thinking this is again another place for testimony. And the idea of something I also find really disturbing on Twitter is that even with the so-called awakening last year, and I put that in air quotes, that even though Black people are supposed to be central, there's still an inability and unwillingness to decentralize white people and whiteness. So even though we're talking about, okay, the police are doing these things and we're breaking down this history, but then we have people doing a Cupid shuffle with the police officer or hugging the police officer and all these kind of traction. So that was predating Give White Men a Chance, because that was more like give cops a chance. And let's like hug them and embrace them. And, they're dancing and they're doing these things. Whereas why do they need to be central? And why are we looking at individuals when this is an institutionalized problem? So again, oversimplifying things to the deficit or to the detriment of Black culture and Black advancement.
That is so true. And I love that assessment. You're very intellectual. That's why I vibe with you. But I mean, my thing is like I'm on there more often now, and I got to tell the truth. The reason why I'm on there more often now is because Facebook is tripping. They ban me like every other week. Yeah, girl. I don't know if you noticed that, but these social media giants. I mean, I hear Twitter be on that sometime too, but it don't seem like Twitter is as bad as Facebook. Facebook is like. They use, I guess, artificial intelligence. And like you used to be able to, like before the election, you used to be able to like at least say, nah, man, I disagree with this. You don't have the context. And then then it'll like get back with you after like a day or two. And then a lot of times, it will straighten out because the artificial intelligence catches everything. And then, you got to get like a human or whatever to like go back and look. Because like I didn't even curse like in this thing that they captured and said, this is what you did. And I'm like, what? You know what I mean? Like there was no curse words. There was no like race, anything. I mean, it was literally a very short sentence. And let me give you the context. It was in a group, because I'm in a group, an investing group on Facebook. And we were talking about artificial intelligence and talking about Tesla, as a matter of fact. And I said, I'm a Tesla investor, but I will never own a Tesla because of my experience of having my email hacked. And from that email getting hacked, my financial service, Coinbase. So Coinbase is like for people who buy crypto. So, that ended up like getting hacked. So I'm like, oh, hell no. Anything that is software based, technology based can be hacked, right? So Tesla is basically an electric vehicle, but it's a software company. It literally does updates like how your phone do updates. That's what Tesla is. And so I was like, I'm an investor, but I'll never own one. I still, for however long we'll be able to in this world, want a gas powered vehicle. Mm-hmm. And so there was a brother that was vibing with me, and he said back, he's like, man, you right, man. He was like, yeah, man, that's too much control. He was like, I don't know if I'll own one either. And he was like, and I said, yeah, and I'm an activist, like that's my work. I was like, we just got done watching Judas and the Black Messiah. We just got done watching what happened to, you know, Ella, I mean, that's not Ella Baker, but the singer,
Billie Holiday. No.
Billie Holiday. Thank you. And how the FBI was like after them for their activism. And the government was, I said, can you imagine driving a Tesla and you lose control and it drive you off a bridge? That's all I said. I literally said, drive you off a bridge. It wasn't 2 minutes where Facebook was like, zoom, you are banned for 7 days. And I was like, am I being punked? Because there was no cuss word. That's literally the conversation. That's what we were talking about. And I was banned. I just got unbanned like yesterday. So I have now decided that I was like, man, let me build up my Twitter thing. You know what I'm saying? Like I got to stop messing with Facebook because that's like the second or third time since the election. They've gotten worse. It's like since the election, that's like I didn't mean to get us off topic, but it's on topic a little bit, but these social media companies are something else and they're not regulated. That's the other thing. Like the government is not keeping up with, you know, all this new quote unquote innovation. The government and none of the regulations, they're not keeping up with it. So anyway, that's my experience on why I haven't like been on Twitter as much, but you probably noticed I've been on there a lot recently because I'm just like, yeah, I can't do Facebook too much longer.
We need your wisdom. I know personally for me, Facebook, I know during the early days, there was like a quiz or something where they have you like talking about what race you would be. And my race turned out to be Black. And then it was like, oh, you know, you're fun to be around, but you're not that smart. That was the first time I feel like Facebook like showed their slip with the idea that there's a racial undercurrent. Then I was around Trayvon Martin. I would say like around after that, after the verdict, not after he died, after the verdict, where I think I saw a lot of Black people were expressing their frustration, rightfully so.
Right.
And you got a lot of, interestingly enough, a lot of non-Black women who were in relationships with Black men censoring people's responses. Like, oh, I thought I knew you. I thought that, like the idea that the rage wasn't justified or feeling as if, you know, justice wasn't served, which it wasn't. The idea of that kind of, that's when I first started turning against Facebook. I haven't been on Facebook for a really long time, but I've been hearing about them doing that. But I'm glad that you brought that up because a lot of people were celebrating when the former president was thrown off Twitter. But the idea is that was an important turning point because that was the beginning of the idea of let's wipe everybody off. Because realistically, yeah, he's been who he is for a long time.
For a long time, before they even existed.
Exactly. And I think the idea is if you don't want to engage with his tweets, block him like everyone else and just ignore what he's saying. You don't have to engage with that. But it's the idea that now you have people saying positive things. And I think even the idea of giving too much intellectualism and gaining too much traction for being an intellectual, that gets you thrown off. It's like Dr. Jeffries, I think, in New York, when he had made a comment, I won't say about a specific group, but about their control over the media.
I know who you're talking about.
Yes.
I know Dr. Leonard Jeffries. Yeah, I already know what it is. Girl, you know we know.
And then the idea of he had to be silenced because he said it to people and people had latched onto it. So it's the idea of like knowledge in isolation, I think is less of a threat than contagious knowledge. We want, you know, just the foolish hashtags to trend. We don't want people to actually start.
Yeah, they love any kind of derogatory, degenerative, like any of that, like BS. Oh, that goes viral. There's no censoring of like, I've seen some listen, I don't know. I was shocked, but I've actually seen porn on Twitter. Have you ran into that?
I've been seeing a lot of that also, but I think it's interesting. It's supposed to be people's likes, but again, I think that's like it's just, and also after a certain time, even I have seen it early too, and I'm just like, what is?
I was shocked. I'm like, man, there's kids on this app.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? But the fact that wasn't like immediate, like the algorithm didn't immediate. When I say immediately, soon as I typed that on Facebook, they was like, bam, like you in jail.
But the idea of censorship also, just to circle back to that, because I'm noticing that there's a trend also with like whatever group is supposed to be receiving hate, that's also used as a censorship. So I know last year, like when it was like the wave of like Black Lives Matter as ammunition against the president. Not necessarily that we care about Black people, but we're going to use this. That was a reason to just kind of fire people all of a sudden that they wanted to get rid of and make it seem like they're all for Black people and they care about it. Now with this other group that's supposed to be centralized at the moment, I've noticed that one of the Black editors was thrown off, like she was lost her job or whatever based on that. So again, the idea of this group,
which organization?
It's not I don't know. I don't necessarily want to be like quoted, but I'm looking just going from the picture. I know the Teen Vogue editor. She looks like she's a woman that at least of partial African descent that was removed because she had said something against this particular group before. So the idea that now we have a Black woman or a woman of African descent being censured for hating on or being hateful towards another group. But I say that to say that the idea of who is central, it's not really about them. It's about how can we, what's another way we can actualize this power and start censoring people. So now it's like, oh, you can't say that. And again, that goes with the larger narrative, the larger myth, I should say, of Black people being racist too. So the idea that you're in an oppressive group, you are an oppressive group, which is problematic, of course.
Right. Absolutely problematic. Yeah, man. And it's like, I was shocked because I would see memes like on Facebook, sometime, and they'll be like, people are crazy. I would see memes like, yeah, man, Black people go to jail more than anybody else in real life and on Facebook. And I had never thought about it. Like, damn, like, do they censor Black voices more than anybody else on Facebook? I'm sure they do, and Twitter as well. Like, I mean, because we are oftentimes like talking about very political things, race, justice, of course, right? Anyway, girl, the other thing that I wanted to kind of get your thoughts about, and this is very current. So I don't know if you have been paying attention to the dust up with Black Lives Matter. It's actually been in the news on and off since December. So like I mentioned, like I'm an activist. I work in the nonprofit industrial complex. The organization that I'm with is education based, so we don't get off into like the other stuff. We actually do the work, right? But I say that to preface to say that I know the industry, if you will, like I know the space, I know like what happens in the space or whatever. And because I also founded my own nonprofit, of which is still in the family business. My husband runs that one. But I know like one of the groups that actually wrote the letter. So it was 10 BLM chapters that wrote initially an open letter to Black Lives Matter Global, basically calling them to account. Like, we haven't received a dime from y'all. Y'all collecting all of this money, because they raised, like, clearly, like everybody was given to Black organizations after George Floyd. You know what I mean? Like, I know a lot of Black organizations that was getting more money, like just from just about everybody. You know what I'm saying? All these different groups wanted to get be a part of racial justice or whatever. And I know for a fact that the DMV, like the DC chapter, they actually do great work. So like, I do think that the locals should be separated from like what our ideas are about, like the national, the global network. The locals are the ones that's actually doing the work, quite honestly. So it was 10 of those chapters. They came together and wrote an open letter and was just like calling them out, like, where's the transparency? We haven't heard from you. We are making these demands. I don't remember them, all of them. But what happened was, as you know, the New York Times did an expose. And so instead of like Black Lives Matter Global responding directly to the people, like responding to the locals, they decided to go give an interview to the New York Times and responded to the New York Times to everything and said that they had $90 million. 90 million. Sis, can you give me this right here, babe? I gotta plug my laptop in. I'm sorry. But $90 million. And so the families got wind of it. Like Tamir, I mean, I don't know if you saw it, but Tamir Rice's mother has been going ham. Richard Reister, I had never heard of him, but apparently that's another brother in LA that was murdered by the police. So they finally released a statement saying that, I mean, they went after everybody, like, they dropped names, you know what I'm saying? And so I just thought it was interesting because Melina Abdullah, who was named in the statement, because Richard Reister, I guess, is from LA, and like that's why her name was named. Melina Abdullah, if you're not familiar with her, she's like the leader of the LA chapter of Black Lives Matter or whatever. And she responded and she basically called the moms Judases, said that they were working for like the CIA. And I couldn't believe that shit. I mean, she insinuated that. She said there's only 3 reasons why people would do something like that. And she named the 3 of them. And she was like, they're working for somebody. They are, meaning like she was insinuating like they are like Judas, like the brother, whatever his real name was, that set Fred Hampton up or whatever. And she was like, we can't let people disrupt our movements, but she never addressed the real pain of these families. And apparently Richard Reiser's mom is homeless in LA. She's navigating homelessness and they're sitting on $90 million. So I'm just sharing all that to, number one, like, I don't know if you follow really the Black Lives Matter movement or like they're keeping up with everything that has been happening, but would just love to get your thoughts based on what I've shared.
I mean, I think it's really hard not to notice, I think, in terms of just the trajectory of the whole thing. I'll be honest with you, I'm always very skeptical of kind of like institutionalized type of anything that becomes institutionalized makes me just very, very nervous. I will say one thing that's good about now is I am happy that so many people are speaking out. I do think that I think from the outside looking in is so many voices now with so many different perspectives. I think it could be hard sometimes to pull in terms of who, not necessarily who to listen to, but the idea of truths and what's going on. But what I will say is a red flag for me was them going to the New York Times. That was like very exposing in terms of doing that, because
even Roland Martin went off about that, girl.
That was like, that's a red flag. But I think in general, and I've heard about this before too. I'm thinking back when I was like still living in New York, there was a situation with a Black group that had grown up. I'm not sure. I don't think it was Black Lives Matter. I think they were affiliated though. And then one of the brothers had gotten traction with white groups and was kissing white babies and was making all of this money, but wasn't giving it to the group. And I say this to say that I think a lot of these leaders or organizations, a lot of them they're not immune to the attention disease of the current moment. So you have the idea of people using stuff for the wrong reason. So it was never about Black people to begin with. I think for a lot of, not necessarily for all the groups, because I think there are some good people involved, but I think the loudest voices a lot of the times and the faces that we see are the people that have become famous off of like Ferguson or off even last year, George Floyd, those kind of famous faces. A lot of the times it's just people. I'm thinking also, I don't know if we can say names, but I'm trying to say with the woman that was also involved with the Women's March, but then also came back and was doing things for the Black group, the idea of that kind of side switching, it does look like, again, you're going for what's hot or the attention and not necessarily for the issues of Black people. But I will say the good thing about it is I do think skepticism is something that we should wear. That should be our outfit and uniforms, just being Black people in this country. We should be skeptical in terms of who's leading, who's talking for us, and who's supposedly raising money for. I think there was also something about a funeral, and then the funeral wasn't paid for, even though people were raising money for the funeral. And I'm just
that was Richard Reiser's mom. She's still, okay. I guess the Black Lives Matter LA chapter raised money, and that mom says she never saw a dime of that money. And it was supposed to be for his funeral. He was killed by the police.
Sorry.
Did you hear me?
No, you froze. Sorry.
Okay. No, I was saying Richard Rice. His first name is Richard. I hate if I'm messing up his last name or whatever. But anyway, it was said that basically the mother never received any of the funding that the BLM chapter raised. That's what she said. Like, she never received a dime. I don't know how he got buried, but she never got any of that money.
I'm glad that that's being exposed. I mean, to be honest with you, like hearing that was really, thank you for clearing up the details of that. I just know that hearing about that was really disturbing in terms of like the idea, but at the same time, there are a lot of things that just don't feel right in terms of these organizations and just how much traction it got, and also how welcoming they were to, I would say, African adjacent people. And I'm not saying that everybody needs to have a Malcolm X separatist ideology, but I do think the ideology, when it becomes cool, wants to join in, that needs to meet more scrutiny in terms of everything that's happened. So the idea of it kind of becoming a kumbaya moment for people to practice liberalism and now like to try to take pictures with Black friends to put on social media next to the George Floyd hashtag, that's something I think Black institutions or Black groups should push against. So, and also people are saying that it became gentrified, but I was hearing in the early stages, like during the Ferguson years, that there were a lot of white philanthropists, which is another bad sign, because the idea is, can we actually expect people who benefit from this anti-Black culture to actually invest in a way that we need to advance? No. We can expect them to do things performatively. We can expect them to pay off people. We also can expect them to pull out the weakest people of our groups and make them the face of our struggle. So I think that it's good in terms of the fact that it's coming out now. And I think that we'll start seeing a lot more grassroots organizations, hopefully, and people who aren't necessarily looking for kind of like, hopefully this doesn't sound like too pejorative, but like the white man's handout, because understand that the idea that we have in terms of a group, everything that we need in terms of moving forward. I also just want to say that I'm a little tired of people who just, after someone dies or after it's a movement, after it's a big moment by the white media, all of a sudden they want to onto these ideas. So I do want to say I appreciate people like you who actually, this is what you do 365, because this isn't something that just happens when the media says it. Because even though the media is covering a different group now, that doesn't mean we're still not being killed. That doesn't mean that we're still not facing economic and social.
That's an excellent point. That's an excellent point. That's an excellent point, because I live in the DC region, and I can tell you as a fact that all Black people who are killed by the police, it don't like make it, like people don't, the activists who usually fly in or come in or whatever, like they don't come unless the media is already covering it. I can count like 10 brothers that's been killed in the DMV region in the last 2 years, right here, that never like made it big. Before that, I lived in Ohio. Obviously, Tamir Rice did make a national splash, but there was like 10 other brothers. Henry Green was killed in Columbus. There was another 13-year-old boy that was killed by the police in Columbus, Ohio. There were 2 that did make a splash, but it was only in Dayton, Ohio, where I live. And I was, and even then I was like, how do people decide which death is gonna make it? You know what I'm saying? Like, who is deciding? I'm serious. I was shocked. And so you're right. It's almost like, I hate to say it, but Tamir Rice's mother called it. She said she called it ambulance chasing.
Oh my goodness. It's, because I'm even thinking also in terms of the voices. I'm thinking I don't know if this is off topic, but I'm thinking in terms of the number of Black women who've gotten platforms this year also. Who's elected to, I guess, talk for us to speak of this also. So we have all of these, unfortunately, like parade of Black bodies and Black tragedy and things that are going on in Black trauma. Then it's like, who's even the platforms to talk about these things? Who's selecting them? The idea is, the problem is, we're not selecting them. We're not selecting how they're represented. We're not selecting who makes the news and how it's being represented. What parts of the story are we hearing? We're never in charge of that. And I think, again, part of that skepticism, we need to put that to the groups also, because who's saying what group gets a chance to be popular? Black Lives Matter is not the only group that was existing. Who made that popular?
It's funny you say that. It's funny you say that, because when you say like Black Lives Matter, there's so many local Black organizations. I want to go back to this point that you made earlier when you were like, support the grassroots groups. That's so true. There's so many under-resourced, Black-led, in the trenches, grassroots organizations all across this country. And I could name 10 of them like right now. You know what I mean? Because I'm connected. I have a network across the country. And one of the most powerful groups, and I have to tell this story, shout out, I know they like, you always talk about it, but shout out to Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle in Baltimore, Maryland. Okay. The one reason why Baltimore never like really got Ferguson, I hate to say that, is because LBS was already there, and LBS already was doing the work. So the community already had a connection to this Black-led, clearly a Black focused organization. And I'm not going to say the name of the individual with LBS because it's not my story to tell, but I'm going to tell the actual story without his name. But one of the people who are at LBS actually had to pull one of these activists aside, I believe it was Alicia Garza, and say, listen, we got this. You feel me? Like just having, like just straight up, like you can get back on the airplane,
Right.
go back to wherever you came from. We got this.
Exactly.
And that's exactly why after Freddie Gray was murdered and the uprising happened in Baltimore, you saw LBS on national news because they were on the ground already. The community knows LBS. They still doing the work. I work with them because I live in Maryland. So I know like they're legit. If you got anybody that want to give some money to an organization that's legit, I vouch for LBS because I give money to them every month. So LBS is definitely one of the organizations in Baltimore, Maryland. That's a local organization that is Black led and Black centric. And how I found out about them, because I was living in Ohio when Freddie Gray happened. I seen their leaders on Fox News going off, like it was Bill O'Reilly. I forget who it was, but like they didn't mince any words. Like the brothers, I said, who is these young brothers with this clarity like this? I ain't used to seeing Black folks talk like this on national media. Who is these brothers? And I Googled them. And from that time, I've been giving money to them because I'm like, I don't see, because even in the movement now, like the people that they put up as our leaders, you said it, you don't see them. And they've been on national media. They don't want voices who have a Black centric, like we are about Black folks. We ain't about all this other shit y'all talking about. And we know what we're talking about, that we're also intellectuals. They never give those kind of Black people a platform. Ever.
No. Right.
And that's to your point.
Exactly. And the idea that we have to still be kind of regarded as like, these people don't exist. And even if they do exist, it's the idea that we have to be shut down, which I'm seeing a lot of on Twitter also. So when you're not censored by the actual, like whatever you behind the actual app, then you have the fact that everybody on the app is actually, I feel like it's so indoctrinated to be anti-Black in some degree that if you're not at any degree, people are very uncomfortable with that. So the idea is to have people jumping on top of you, people reporting you, doing all these type of things because you're telling the truth. And the truth has become, what's the word for it? Has become very contemptuous. Not that it always wasn't, but given the visibility, the increased invisibility of social media, I think it's interesting because I think for a lot of people, there's a higher intolerance for things that are true or things that are going to disrupt the comfort.
I agree. I think you're absolutely right. And, you know, the other thing that I've noticed too is that I feel like, you know, and this isn't a revelation, I'm sure somebody's probably done some research on this, but I feel like it's like the so-called leaders, they're picked. The other thing that I have to say, I have to bring up Ferguson again, is that there are actual Black leaders. They just weren't as organized as LBS was already in the community and the relationships and the work that they had already been doing. But there were Black folks already, even in Ferguson. They just wasn't as organized and didn't already have an infrastructure, if you will. LBS had an infrastructure. And so they couldn't like tell all the Brittany Packness and there's a bunch of people who like blue vests, like D-Ray. A lot of these people made their name off of Ferguson.
Right.
And Elaine Brown, I might have to share this, but I don't know if you saw it, but I retweeted her the other day going off about like how we don't even say off the pigs no more. This is gonna get my YouTube channel taken down. But like we don't even say that no more. You know what I'm saying? She was like, you know, since we ain't saying that, so I guess we got to, you know, deal with this. Like she just went off, you know what I'm saying? Like, and then she also brought up Ferguson. She was like, all these people that made their names on Ferguson, the same white racist mayor that they had, who was a former pig, this is her words, he was a police officer and he's a Republican, got reelected after Mike Brown, like after everybody left and made their names and got their bags and their MSNBC contributor status. And she was like, what's wrong with that picture, you know?
I just think it was really refreshing that you retweeted that. It's just refreshing to see someone think outside the box, because you think of how much pushback and how castigated the Black community was for saying defund the police. Even that was a huge here, the idea of even doing that. And then even institutions, I think, pushing those kind of defund but they had a very different idea. They just meant in terms of reallocating the funds. So I think that she really highlights an important point that a lot of times the admonishment or the pushback that people have towards these sources of white supremacy, they're very like, it's kind of like a slap on the wrist. Like, we just want to come out and say what they're doing. We don't actually want to punish them. We don't actually want to see it involved and see them like suffer in any type of way. And I'm not necessarily trying to say anything to get your channel like, you know, thrown off YouTube, but the idea of it's okay for us to be slaughtered and killed, and we have to watch pretty much every other month somebody else getting off for killing people. And now Eric Chauvin getting the third degree murder is a complete slap in the face. That's like they barely didn't want to give him anything. Third degree murder.
Oh, give me an update on that. Somebody, you know, since I actually don't have television at home, and I usually get most of my news from social media. Can you give me an update about what happened with that?
I don't really. So I just want to say I'm kind of on the same page with you. I definitely don't have TV either. But the last I heard was that just that he's on trial, and I was just referring to the third degree murder charge is what they brought him up on under. So it's not. We didn't even get second degree. We got basically a very low. They're low balling. So even if he is actually brought up on charges or given jail time, it's still like would be the very, very bare minimum in terms of what they're doing. So when we go back, just to go back to kind of what you know, Elaine was saying, like the idea of kind of like that, I don't want to say old school, but the idea of actually wanting justice for Black people, justice that isn't defined by an unjust system. It's like there's still kind of there's a fear of actually even saying like, hey, this isn't right and this person deserves to pay, or there deserves to be some kind of consequence that isn't okay. We're just going to reallocate funds, or we're going to do this, or we're going to train it away. You can't train away systemic and social anti-Blackness. Only thing you could do is train them to be careful, or train them to be better at killing us. And that's exactly what we're going to see.
Yeah, I'm going to try to see if y'all can listen to this. Hold on. I'm going to try to share my screen. Usually when I share my screen and I try to play, hold on, let me see. When I try to play audio, it don't work. Let me try it because I want people to, okay, share screen. Let me see. Hold on. Some screens let you share audio. Check. Lord have mercy. StreamYard getting on my nerves. Let me see. Oh, here we go. Yeah, there you go. Okay, yeah. All right, can y'all see this? Can you see this?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, listen to what she said.
I'm coming. I am here in this fight for the long old me. I want to remind folks that there's only 3 reasons that people would do that, would try to disrupt a movement. Either they work for somebody other than the people, either they're driven by ego, or their pain is being manipulated by the state. And so I'm not going home just because somebody said go home. I will not do that. I will fight with my last breath until our people are free. And God has told me that my last breath is going to be a long time coming. I am here in this fight for the long term, as are my entire crew. Ashe, ashe, as is my entire crew. We are committed to Black liberation struggle, and it is what it is. I see you, Brother Sean. I know you are too. I know you are too.
All right, so I had to let people listen to that like for themselves. So you heard for yourself that this is how she describing mothers that of the men that they've been doing die-ins for and collecting money for. This is how she's describing mothers of their dead sons.
Wow. Powerful.
And then she said, and I see you, Sean. I guess she's talking about Sean King, because Sean King was named. Like Samaria Rice didn't. I actually talked to her earlier this week. She ain't mincing words. Like she, like DAF, like don't give, you know what I mean? DGF, she don't give a fuck. Like she's like, I'm clear, you know? And I just wanted her to know, like, I see you, I know you are in a lot of pain. I'm sure she don't remember me, but like when Tamir Rice was killed, I was living in Ohio at the time. So there was a lot of organizing that happened like all over the state, you know what I'm saying? Because that was one of those things that like made national news or whatever. And then I don't know if you remember how much you follow BLM, but this was before I like really woke up to them. And it was actually at this conference that I kind of woke up to them. But Black Lives Matter had their very first conference in Cleveland because of Tamir Rice. And I want to say this was like back in 2016, I think, in the summer of 2016, because I remember my daughter was a baby still, and I still needed a changing table and needed to go to a bathroom and stuff like that to like take care of her. And it was on the campus of Cleveland State University. And this was the first time I had encountered, like the gender, changing the bathrooms and stuff. Like I had never encountered that before. So like on the campus of Cleveland State University, they had like covered up whether it was a male or a female bathroom and said, this is gender neutral. And mind you, like me and my husband, I took my whole family because I'm thinking this is about Black people. This is about our kids. You know, we're commemorating Tamir Rice. You know, this is a fun family, like, you know, event. And we drove up from Dayton. It's about 3 hours from, you know, Dayton is 3 hours from Cleveland. And when I went to like take my daughter so I could change her diaper and stuff, there was a man, because I couldn't see whether it was a man or a woman bathroom. There was a man in there using the urinal, and I got my baby. Ugh. And I was just like, you know, I'm all for people being comfortable in who they are. I am. Be who you want to be. But they're not thinking about like families. You can tell like the movement is anti-family. You know what I'm saying? Why would I want to go change my daughter in the bathroom with a man who's standing over there pissing with his dick out? I mean, do you understand what I'm saying?
Whew, I'm just thinking about that is very.
And I remember I went and told my husband, I said, shit, I'm gonna have to go walk to the car or something and change her or something. He was like, what? Like, cause he was even confused. Like they didn't tell nobody that they was gonna do this. Like, so I'm sure I wasn't like the only like parent or a group of a Black family that came.
I used to live on the West Coast. So I think like, I used to live in Oakland. So I think my first kind of feel with that was, I want to think that, I don't want to say I think they were ahead with that, but that was an early, the LGBT movement is very like,
they're stronger in California than Ohio. Trust and believe. There was a lot of Ohio people in there probably confused as fuck, just like I was. Because that wasn't the norm in Ohio at all.
Right. Because that was very like, because I know when I said that to say, when I came back to the East Coast, I was kind of surprised because even with the bags, they were like big on bringing your own bags, and the bathrooms were like unisex. A lot of places that you went, I know where I had worked at Berkeley City College, and they had like the unisex restroom for like all students.
Even Cleveland State wasn't like that. They literally covered it up. They used like the big Post-it notes that you can buy like from. So Cleveland State wasn't even doing that yet, but they used the big Post-it notes, and they wrote over gender neutral. So you couldn't see under the Post-it note. Like I just was like, because people were like, oh, that's the bathroom. And it would say gender neutral. So I was like, okay. So I just took a chance. And that's what I walked into.
See, and I think, again, that's something that's very revelatory, I would say also in terms of that also. I know you mentioned like the idea of it being anti-Black family, but the idea of this kind of inclusiveness. And again, I'm not trying to put down other people's groups. I'm with you with the idea of people being comfortable and everything also, but it just seems like that's to disrupt comfort or degree of comfort in terms of what's going on, because that just, again, in terms of families and just in terms of just general, in terms of the way people are thinking, especially I would say also in Ohio, it's not like we're in like some very like, I'm not trying to be disrespectful, metropolis type of area where you have like a bunch of people that are kind of expecting that, thinking that's cool. That's very revelatory because it's like, who are you here for? And what are you working for? Because if this is a Black event, not trying to be mean, why is the energy even placed towards making the bathrooms inclusive? Why is all the energy not towards making whatever it is inclusive to Black people and making things anti-Black? Because I don't see a connection between the two of those. And again, that overlap is something that we're starting to see a lot more now, unapologetically. Now it's like, okay, we're doing this, but this is for everybody. The idea of trying to Americanize the African experience to make things seem more intense for other groups, but meanwhile, we continue to get the short end of the stick. if we even get to stick at all. And I just, and again, if you say things like this is the type of stuff that gets you blocked or gets you a bunch of hate comments or gets you flagged, because it's sounding like you're against other groups. But the reality is this is other groups or other agendas being against Black people. And it's being placed in a way that you're being held accountable to a moral standard that no other group is held to with regard to anti-Blackness and Black people.
It's Eurocentric. It's Eurocentric, all of it. Like, one of the things that I, really appreciate about some scholars like Brother Tommy Curry. I don't know if you follow him on Twitter, but Dr. Tommy Curry is and one of the amazing scholars who just pushes against the grain, right? Like, and just tells the truth about, from a data perspective about what's really happening in Black homes, in Black communities. There's some other scholars on there as well that I respect. But Valethia Watkins, she doesn't really have a social media presence, but she's on Twitter finally, I noticed, but she ain't really on there. Like, she created a thing, but she ain't on there like that. So I was surprised to see that she was on there. But Valethia Watkins, Dr. Valethia Watkins, who teaches at Howard University, is also an unapologetically African scholar, I would say, in terms of her scholarship. And there's a number of others. But one of the things that I've noticed, and so I bring them up, is because they push back against the Eurocentric frame on a lot of these things when it comes to, what's the biggest thing that I see about Black men, are the number one contributors to the death of Black women. That's actually a lie. And Tommy Curry has called that out, right? Mm-hmm. And Valethia Watkins calls, a lot of the stuff that today's feminists talk about, she calls it revisionist history, because it is. And so these are folks who are really rooted in the communities themselves, and also in doing actual responsible academic work, and not doing things for the gram or for likes or for clout or to get a pat on the head from white folks. You feel me? So those are the people that I kind of respect. The vast majority of scholars, though, I have to be honest, especially the ones who have a social media presence, they're insufferable to me. Insufferable. I mean, they are so anti-Black and don't realize it. So anti-Black and don't realize you are being paid because you're anti-Black. It pays. Think about Candace Owens. That's to the other extreme. But think about Candace Owens. I looked at her profile the other day because of all of the stuff that happened with, her and Cardi B. I didn't really get into that, but I happened to click on her Twitter profile. 2.6 million followers. Girl, and you already know that ain't all Black people, them white people.
Of course.
Because she's anti-Black. And she's she got a book deal. She got a podcast. She is being paid handsomely. She's no doubt a millionaire, straight up. And she's a millionaire because she says certain things. And the same thing on the left, those are the people that we're talking about, the Alicia Garzas. No doubt in my mind, everybody talking about they want to see Trump tax return. Shit, we need to see Candace Owens tax returns. Girl, how much money you making out here being a coon?
I just Candace Owens is a long way from that girl in Connecticut that was scared to go to school because the white people were tormenting her. So she's talking all about I know she.
That's how I know she don't believe what she's saying. She just getting paid. She don't believe that shit she's saying.
But the idea is, and I think also with her also, I guess this also bothered me too, because I know I had wrote something the other day on Twitter and someone was like, oh, well, she's so articulate. One, that word, they only use that to talk about Black people.
Right.
I won't call a white person articulate, so spare us the adjective as well. But I would say also the idea that of affording any kind of novelty or respectability, any politic of respectability to this woman is problematic to me, because she works really, really hard to sound like this super educated person. She is not educated, which I think is a lot of people would be surprised, because she works really hard to fool people about that.
She works really hard
to make people do that. But also, I think that there's an important role that she plays specifically for that white conscious. One, she's saying things, I feel in terms of, she's like a parrot in terms of white ideas, of course.
That's a parrot. Oh.
But also the idea that she becomes kind of who white people can point to kind of hide behind their own overt racism. Oh, well, Candace Owens said, she becomes a person to quote. And I think also for Black people, and also not necessarily for Black people, but to kind of project an anti-Black perspective, she's a way that people can kind of blame things on her. The idea that she can become kind of like the scapegoat or means for Black people to hate themselves or blame themselves for things. Oh, well, she's saying this and she's doing that. Whereas in reality, she exists to give life to the myth of America. That's what she does. And I feel like in terms of everything that she has, that's why, and I would actually, to be honest with you, I bet she is being paid, but I wouldn't be surprised if she's vastly underpaid for how much she sold out for. So she stood on the auction block, but I don't think she went for a very high asking price. And I think that, and that's something I think that I would want to also be in the conversation that she's engendering about Cardi B. Like, oh, they deserve better role models. People deserve better role models than her also.
Than you, right.
Y'all are both on the auction block. She just going about it different type of ways, because Candace couldn't sell it the same way that Cardi does, and Cardi couldn't sell it in the same way that Candace does, but they selling the same thing to the highest bidder.
That's funny you say that, because Boyce Watkins made the same observation. He made the same observation. He said the same thing. He was like, both of y'all, like, both of y'all working for the man. I don't know what you're talking about. So somebody said in the comments, I want to see Jesse Lee Peterson tax return. You know who that is? He is terrible. Jesse Lee Peterson, oh my God. I be just like, ever since I seen Get Out, I relate that to so many things in the world. Like his lobotomy has been completed. Jesse Lee Peterson, oh my God. He believed the stuff he say.
But the irony of that film in itself, I think also you got the idea that he's writing this kind of something that I think that movie probably wouldn't have been made if he was, one, not a Black comedian, and if he was a Black man married to a Black woman.
Yeah, he married to a white woman.
Because now it's like if he was married to a Black woman and he wasn't a comedian, people actually might take it seriously. And I think that, again, the idea that people don't want stuff like that to be taken seriously. And Candace Owens is also, to go back to the
white man.
Right. The idea that she goes back to that hashtag, give white men a chance, because that's something we see even with Kamala Harris. The idea that this kind of
white man,
this white man is what accompanies successful Black women. So even the idea that
have you noticed that? Like, have you noticed that since the whole Meghan and Harry that it's come out that she's thinking about running for president? So it's like you got to be an ambiguous, not really Black woman, but claim Blackness, because Kamala Harris, okay, all right. So you got to be ambiguously Black, somewhat Black. Well, yeah, you can get off with being Black, but not really have ever lived a Black experience. Kamala Harris, Obama. Let's just be honest. These are the Blacks that they pick. Obama never really lived a Black experience. He lived in Kansas and Hawaii and Indonesia. What Black folks, live with white grandparents in Kansas. Right? I'm serious. And then they lived in Indonesia because their mama married another man of color and was married and had some more kids. So, I mean, and then Kamala Harris, she hates her Black dad. She don't even mention him. He's still alive. Nobody's ever seen him. He's never been interviewed. It's like he don't exist. It's like he dead. She talks about her mom. She never talks about her Jamaican Black father. And then Meghan Markle, right? Like she had to show the world her Black mother, who her mother is very Black, right? I mean, but even like, and somebody pointed out, like, well, did she live like a Black? Like, did she claim being Black? Like, is she Black or what is she? Like, and so people were pointing out, like, well, apparently she was never really Black into this experience. So I don't know how true that is. And I'm not here to tell people, who want to be Black, I guess, when it's convenient, right? Whatever. Like, but I do think that people who point those things out should not be shunned, because there is a very specific Black person that is being picked in this new world to be elevated. Like they done with Jesse Jackson's, they done with Vernon Jordan's, he just passed, rest in peace. They done with like the descendants of enslaved Africans in this country, because we ask for too much. You know what I'm saying? We too mean. You know what I mean? Like, because we have lived this experience with white folks. They rather pick Black people who don't necessarily have that same lived experience with white people. You see what I'm saying? I don't know if you understand what I'm saying, but it's like they pick Black people who are like Black because one of their parents are Black, or Black because one of their grandparents are Black. But you know what I'm saying? It's like they kind of Black, and they can claim black. Like, I don't know.
No, I 100% agree. And I think that that kind of emphasis on migrancy also, because we don't want to pretend like that blackness doesn't correspond to a diaspora. We understand that. But the idea of, I guess, that meditation on the black migrant as a black leader, as the portrait of exemplary blackness, that's not accidental. And the idea is to shift the narrative from abduction, the fact that you abducted people and brought them to America, to shift that to the coming to America narrative. That's not accidental either. And again, this is not to put down black people that came here from other countries. This is about how systemically that functions. Because if we start moving the narrative from the fact that we were abducted, then this country doesn't have to be accountable for anything that they've done. That original sin becomes obscured under like the whole better world. Because even the idea of the narrative of migrancy, that's something that, again, can take it away from blackness. So we go back to that restroom at the Black Lives Matter event that you went to, that's inclusive. Now, all of a sudden, this type of Black American presents an inclusive identity that now I could talk to everybody. Everybody came to America for something. We're all immigrants, right? No, we're actually not.
No, we're not. I push back against that all the time. And Joe Biden did that like a week after he got elected. Right. He put out this video, an immigrant video, like we're all immigrants. America was built by immigrants. And I was like, you mean to tell me Saunders ain't nobody black on y'all team? Tell y'all let's use some different language?
Right. And we can use those languages when it comes to pronouns, right? So we have to put our pronouns up there. We can do that. But I feel like in terms of when it comes to using language that actually acknowledges, though, that particular faction, that if there was no black people, if there were no abducted Africans, there would be no America and there would be no fake democracy either.
Period.
So that you want to ignore all of that, but you want to stand on top of our dead bodies and unmarked graves and talk about an inclusive America and let's use pronouns and we're all immigrants. That erasure is not accidental. So I said that to say
it's not accidental.
Bringing up that narrative. And also, I know Alice Walker talks a lot about like the black woman that got off those ships. So when we see these mixed race people or these people that I guess kind of look a certain way or kind of, or at least I don't want to necessarily say look a certain way because it's partially about how you look, but it's also partially about what you see. And I feel like we've been trained to see people in terms of color and features and things like that. But the idea of projecting that in terms of that's the blackness that's worth being protected, there's a mythos that goes with that also, because in terms of Kamala Harris, in terms of these black women that get certain places, they're maintaining a lot of anti-black ideology, even autonomous from their anti-black actions and other things that go on. And that's something, again, that goes against kind of the intellectual advancement that we need. So pushing back on that needs to be default. And we need to be, again, that skepticism needs to be our outfit as a people.
I completely agree. But I think you were trying to make a point about like how some sisters, Candace Owens, I think like some sisters who have like very high profiles, the ones I would say that have been pushed up recently are either single, in same-sex relationships, or married to white men. I can't identify one sister that is currently popular, like in the movement or like thinking about running for something or whatever, like that is in like the media heavily. I can't think of one sister that if she's not single, in a same-sex relationship, or married to a white man, none of them I don't think are married to black men. None of them.
Not with a strong presence, because I can think of a few like that. They're not strong in terms of black men. So they may
like the white media is not in love with them, right? Like when I say like have been propped up, like of course, like I'm married to a black man, right? Like there are some sisters that's out here, a lot of us that's doing the work. Like, you know, we're very much black identified. We're very, very much like Afrocentric, whatever you want to call it, pro-black. Like we don't exist at that level. Those of us who black husband, black children, all black everything, right? But the people that, and I'm just trying to think of some, like, you know, and that's why I'm asking you, like, maybe you can help me. Maybe there are some that are out there that are married to black men that have platforms, but most of them are either single, same-sex relationship, or married to a white man.
Or they're masked behind things also. Because I think also like the idea of even the type of black women that I'm seeing a lot of, it's very similar. The idea that they pick safe black people. Perfect. And safe, I feel like is very like, that's something we see in different variants, different places. So sometimes you'll have a black woman that's working really hard to talk in a way that if you weren't looking at her, you would question the fact that she had melanin or not. or the idea that she's sitting up there with overtly maybe hair that isn't hers or Eurocentric.
Right.
So something in that type of way. So in that type of sense, you could be married to a black man, but your stance and the way that you're presenting yourself is not strong. And I'm not saying that to critique what people do aesthetically, but again, I'm talking about the systemic affect of that. And also the idea of these white men. That's why I had a problem with Scandal. I know I'm going back to the white media again.
No, let's do it, girl.
With Kerry Washington that came out in 2012, and that became big. That was the beginning of of course, this isn't new. We've had, the whole interracial thing before. The whole loving thing, but notice that loving case also resurfaced in this contemporized movie.
It did. They made a movie about it.
It became a film. It became a whole thing. Let's interview the woman let's interview her now because she's still alive. Let's do all of this now. But the idea that scandal or that Shonda Rhimes, where she got such like a huge esteem for that was the beginning of a contemporary moment. A contemporary, I would say, a way to try to assassinate the black family, and the idea that the black woman, if you want to be somebody, if you want power, if you want these things, you have to get you the ultimate accessory. You have to be chose by a white man. And we see that on YouTube also. You think about Jamie and Nikki. I believe they're separated now. But the idea that you had a black woman, very unadulterated blood, beautiful black skin. You have someone like her with a white man and people seeing her beauty because she's with a white man. So that's defining her beauty also. Giving her success in terms of, seen as giving her success in terms of their existence on YouTube. Gabe and Babe, there's a number of black couples or black women that were part of that one half of this kind of interracial couple, white man, black woman, and people, of course, are obsessed with the kids. That's not, and that's something that I saw a lot of after that scandal, after Scandal, and even the other shows that came on, it became like a rite of passage for this black female protagonist to have to sleep with white men, even on Being Mary Jane, which was, of course, starring Gabrielle Union.
Did you notice that? Right.
Where'd you find this white man on
Being Mary Jane, yep.
What is this? But even the black men that she was engaged, that she wanted to be in relationships with, all of them were very like fair-skinned black men also. So again, we're kind of pulling on the colorism.
Colorism, yep.
So I think that wasn't accidental, and that was the beginning of something. And that was also, I would notice black women being very open about wanting to be desired by white men. And also now you're seeing the white men.
I have never felt such.
Me neither. And even white men touching and doing black hair, because I've noticed that also now that they got like the mixed race kids that have gotten, they've gotten older, they've aged in this kind of moment. Now that you have like the white fathers doing their hair and they're getting like a lot of views for doing that. And again, this is still white acceptance, but also give white men a chance and making white men.
Serena Williams.
That was a huge thing also. And I think
that was a huge, I'm not going to lie. Serena, seemed like she would never do something like that to me. Like, I was shocked. I was legitimately shocked.
I wasn't, I guess,
because I'm Compton.
I remember back when I used to look through my dad's Jet magazines and they had her going through the beach and she had on a bikini and some white man running behind her. I was like, because my father made sure to show me that.
I never saw that part. That's funny.
To let me know this is not what you do. But the idea of also, I think there was a number of she was connected to a lot of high profile black men. Also, interestingly, very fair skin, also Drake, Common. So for her to go for that to a very white man on Reddit, I think also, and I'm not trying to, I want to get back to this. Maybe we'll talk about this later, but I think a woman like Serena Williams, also somebody who had this empire, somebody with all of this talent, this black woman.
And she's very black. They ain't nothing. She has a very black aesthetic, a build. She's black. Her daddy is super black. I don't think her father was even at the wedding. We can read into that, right?
I would say also, I'm not trying to, and again, I know I'm probably going to alienate some people with these comments, but the idea that Serena, a lot of, I would say her physical choices in terms of, I noticed with the blonde wig, the blonde type of hair, that was something that she kind of became kind of a trademark in terms of her look. That was when I started looking at her, because a lot of, I don't know, and I'm not trying to say this to be mean or anything. I don't know if she was really seen as kind of like a Beyonce or somebody in that type of space, but I definitely think
you're right. I don't think she was ever seen as a Beyonce. No.
Not in that type of, but she was a revered black woman, a strong black woman. And I think that if she had chosen a black man to be with, I think that would have sent a strong message to black people, black women. Because I think the idea is that someone like Beyonce or someone like a Kelly Rowland or someone I'm trying to think, I'm running out of people, they're seen as people who can get black men. Whereas you have these other people that maybe maybe because of certain features in a way that the system and socially people have been programmed to interpret certain Afrocentric features, the idea that a white man is seeing beauty in that, which I would push against that entirely. They're just trying to actualize their power as white men with black women. That is not an appreciation for black culture. But the idea that it's seen as that way, they're seen as above black men, and I'm able to appreciate what the black man doesn't. So the black man wants the Beyonce, and the white man wants the Serena or wants the Nikki Thought, that's not a reality either. There are plenty of black women who have that similar aesthetic, who are married happily with black men and have kids, but that's not what the white media wants to portray. And that's very poisonous in terms of just to young girls looking at that and thinking like, okay, I look like Serena Williams. Okay, I'm going to seek validation in that also. It's not, that was a huge blow to us as a collective.
I think so too. I think about this a lot because, having a type is real. I have never in my 40 years of living been attracted to white men. And some people may say that's racist. I just have never, maybe I'm the reverse colorist because I have always loved dark black men. Always. Like that has been my type. And it's probably because my brothers were light, definitely the master was all up in the slave cabin in my lineage, you know what I'm saying? Because, a lot of my people in my family, are light skinned. In fact, my great grandmother, her father, was white. My great grandmother was born in 1913, and her mother was formerly enslaved. So my great great grandmother was formerly enslaved. And so the white man was still having his way. As you know, right after slavery, you had peonage and sharecropping. So like right after slavery was ended, there was still this institution where white people still had access to the black women who were still working, for them or still doing something for them. And they still had that access to black women. And so my great grandmother was what they call biracial. Now, back then you was just black. I think this whole biracial thing is funny now too, because my grandmother would never call herself biracial. She never identified as anything other than black, ever, And so we can see it in our family, but all of my brothers, they're even lighter than me. So I've never liked light-skinned black men. I could see some who were attractive, but to be with them, marry them and have kids, no, but yeah, that's my own preference. But I think this whole thing about black women being with white women, I started seeing the trend again in Ohio before I moved here to the DMV region. And I was really shocked, really. And I see it a lot now. I see it a lot more than I did then. I see it a lot. And I'm just I just wonder what kind of sister that is, because I don't like them. I'm not attracted to them. Hell, you know what I'm saying? It's to me.
I just can't. I just keep thinking about this picture. I don't know how old I was when I saw it, because I literally, I have I can't really describe what it would actually be, but I feel like it's just in my mind. I feel like every time I think about black people with white people or anything, I always think about this image. I think it's Claude Neal or Jesse Washington's lynching, and you see the white people smiling in front of it.
Yeah, smiling.
For me, I'm not interested in engaging with anyone who descends from anybody who is behaving that way. That shit for me is an espousal to my culture, and I can't keep being attracted to that. And I think there's such a thing as being attracted to culture. In terms of that also, in terms of with Eve too, I've seen a lot of interesting comments in terms of that also. But I think that, again, I can't not attribute that to running away from who you are. And I think this is not even necessarily a new discussion. The idea that you're going for these people, and I want to be clear in terms of me, when I'm saying white, I'm talking about everybody who's not a descendant of African people. I consider all of that in that. So the idea is you're with those people because that's who you want to be. You want to be a white woman, so you get a white man, so you can live through that kind of fantasy. And it's the same thing. You want to be a white man, you get you a white woman, or anything else, anything that's not black, because any of those other groups, they still have access to be racist in a way that black people don't, in that way, to systemically disenfranchise and hurt other people to your benefit. Other groups have that. And the idea of also with being with someone, and we're seeing a lot of these black women now coming forward about being beat down by these white men now, and they're not getting any traction for that. I know FKA Twigs and the other black woman that was in a relationship with that football player who this is not going to be helpful. He don't look mentally healthy anyway, so I don't know how that ever like happened. But the idea that they're getting beat down, their voices are not being heard because you're in a relationship with someone where there's a systemic imbalance with that. They have an advantage over you. You're lucky they didn't arrest you when they came over to supposedly investigate them. So to me, it's also like it's not socially healthy, it's not mentally healthy. And to me, I can't see you as being kind of like a stable or culturally conscious person that you desire, especially being a Black woman. I can't imagine getting up in the bed and waking up and looking over and seeing anybody who's not African. You have to be able to share my experience. Like, it's not even, I don't even like thinking about that. To me, it's just, I don't, no, woof, never.
Even before I was conscious, like because I ain't grow up like this, you know what I mean? Like, I grew up going to church and everything that all other regular Black people do, you know what I'm saying? So even before I came into consciousness, if you will, I wasn't attracted to white men then. And I wasn't nowhere near as conscious as I am now. I've just never been attracted. I don't understand. Like, I mean, I get it. Like, if it's, if you've grown up in a like white neighborhood, but I grew up with a very Black experience. I grew up in rural Alabama, although I was born in Cleveland, Ohio, in the Black community in Cleveland, Ohio. I was actually reared and raised in the Black belt of Alabama, where 90% of the county was Black. I grew up right outside of Selma, where the Civil Rights Movement started in Dallas County. And so those counties in central Alabama are like 90% Black. So I grew up going literally still to all Black schools in the 80s. Most of my teachers was Black. The principal was Black. I had a very Black experience. So I get like people from our generation, if you didn't live like in a hood or didn't live in the rural South in a all Black like town or all Black community, I get that a lot of our people that are our age went to integrated schools or went to suburban schools where they were one of few only Black students. And so their experience is different. I can acknowledge that. That's fine. Your experience is different. You had access to a whole lot of white folks. White people, you have their linguistic tongue. Like, that's your thing. But like maybe my influence growing up in a Black family, growing up on a farm in the South and being around other Black people, I just never. And that's the other thing too, is like, you also didn't see a whole lot of interracial relationships in the South. It was still an unspoken thing that you just didn't do. This was back in the 80s and 90s. Now it's probably different now, but in the 80s and 90s, you ain't seen a whole lot of Black men with white women and Black women with white men. Not in Selma.
The thing is, I would say also, like, for me, I didn't grow up in the South. I grew up in Laurelton, Queens, New York, which is a Black middle. I don't want to do the E. Franklin Frazier, but like a Black area.
I feel you.
Black homeowner areas. Everybody's pretty much either Black, either from here, like from, or migrant Black people. Homeowners, everybody goes there. So I'd say that definitely growing up around Black people, it becomes, it's interesting. I was actually reading an article by Ta-Nehisi Coates that he's talking about this also, like Black people who grow up in these areas, you come into your Blackness differently because it becomes a default. It's not like an anomaly, like you're the only person. But I would say also, I'm wondering in terms of upbringing, because I just think in terms of me, I was always taught that was not acceptable, that the idea of like, that's not, there was always kind of I can't really describe it without, I'm not trying to make my dad seem like crazy, but the idea that it was put down, it was expected for you to love your culture enough that who you choose needs to look like, not look like my dad, please. No, I look so like funny. But the idea of like, it has to look like your culture, has to look like your heart. That's the idea that was put down. I was not taught that was like acceptable in terms of how people who did decide to go over the bridge, you were castigated. So I'm wondering in terms of, is that something we take for granted as Black people? Because I think for other groups, it kind of goes without saying a lot of the time that whoever you're around, you go find your own when it's time to get married or have kids or something, or at least somebody who's come to your ideology. And that goes with the idea also, you could be with these non-African people that maybe aren't white, but you're still coming over to their ideas in terms of that also. So you're socially reproducing their culture and their ideas, but yours is dying. So you could look at someone like, I think, Quincy Jones or Diana Ross and look how they or Barry Bonds, how they wiped out all of their Blackness in like 2 generations. But you have to think also.
Did you notice that? In 2 generations, they wiped out their Blackness. Yeah.
Drake too, they were talking about that, like his father. It's like the idea that with Drake's son, the idea that the blackness is gone. But you think also
his baby mama white?
Oh yeah, that was a huge thing. Yeah.
I did not know that.
Baby looked nothing like him, blonde hair, blue eyes. It's wow. So I have to say his father, Dennis Graham, he's wiped out in terms of like just 2 generations. But I said that to say culturally wiped out too. So ideology, you're not even passing on the kind of like the ideology that we need in terms of moving on. So it's so much to that in terms of, so I say that to say, like, we're taught to believe like, oh, this is racist to be that way. No, wanting to preserve your culture and wanting to kind of avoid and it's actually a very strategic and ubiquitous, I would say, cultural assault to get Black women, because we're the keeper of culture. So if you got a Black woman with a white man, that's a lot of
going after Black women. If you notice, like, Black women are strategically being held up.
Yes, 100% in terms of the idea of that's a specific assault of the Black womb. Because if you think about like to the plantation times, that was what was going on. It was the white man having sex with the Black woman to populate and socially reproduce this kind of enslaved ideology. And it's the same thing that we're seeing now. That's why that's being attacked. And I'm not saying that to say that Black male choice doesn't matter. It does matter. And I feel like in terms of that, and of course, like most Black men are married to Black women and pursue that's a myth that they're trying to.
That's true. Yeah, most Black men are married to Black women. Let's just be real clear about that. Like, we're talking about the ones that the media want to lift up, but absolutely most Black men are married to Black women, and I think that despite all of the programming, it will continue to be that way. Seriously, I think so.
Definitely. I am a little concerned about us as Black women, because this is being very serious. This has become very serious now in terms of the attack on us. And I'm seeing a lot more, because even, I don't know if you've heard of Kevin Samuels in terms of his like this
girl, yeah, you know, I heard of that, brother. But I talk about it, girl.
I just say this to say, like, one, he's problematic for so many other reasons, in terms of like in so many things that are going on with him that are just wrong. But I would say the ideology of like the mythos of a high value man. And then he asked women questions, and I thought it was interesting that he asked them, does race matter? So it's also like he's also in a lot of ways becoming a bridge of these Black women that are looking for love. And we live in a different world now. It's nice to hear that you're married and you have children and you have a life. But there are a lot of Black women that do want to start a family and are looking for people. It's different now. Whereas I feel like 10, maybe not 10, but 20, 30 years ago, by like the time you're in your 30s or whatever, most people were married and had kids. We're seeing that a lot less now. And I think that's because a lot of Black women are much more educated now. So like people are, their priorities have shifted. But I say that to say that he seems like he's kind of a bridge to Black women going to the other side also. So the idea, if you want to find love and you want these certain things, you want the certain lifestyle, you should be open to men of different races. And I've read a number of
articles. Say more about that. I don't listen to him, and I did not know that he was saying shit like that. The only things that I've seen about him is that him like demeaning Black women or whatever, like telling them like you overweight, you already got a baby and stuff like that. There was something that went viral recently, and it wasn't about like encouraging Black women to like look at other races.
But he's doing the same. But the idea of even doing that, like beating a Black woman down, like berating women for getting an education, berating women for not looking up to these like white standards, because realistically, I'm not trying to put anybody down, but these non-African adjacent women are not held to these aesthetical standards that Black women are held to. We're supposed to be flat across the board. We're supposed to check all, and Black women are naturally beautiful also, but we're held to the highest standards unfairly in terms of all of this.
I agree.
Things that go on. But I say that to say you berate and you beat down Black women enough, then you have these white men who will prey on you, because you can go to Whole Foods. I go there. They will prey on you at Whole Foods. They'll prey on you other places. And if you don't have a strong sense of self and you're not looking for a Black man and you're not feeling a certain way, you will fall into the trap of a white man trying to actualize his power, or any other type of man. So that's my biggest issue with him anyway. So besides the fact that he blatantly says that, does race matter? In terms of that, what he's doing, he's preparing Black people to be kind of swept up into the waves of white supremacy. And that's a problem with that. If you build Black women up, most Black women, I would say, want to be with a Black man. That's something commonly that a lot of them say that end up with white men. Oh, this wasn't what I thought about, but you got either, I think, lonely, or like you beat down so much, or you lost hope. That person showed up, and it's like they're doing the whole knight in shining armor, but realistically, it's just because that's what you were looking for. You weren't feeling good about yourself. So that whole self and esteem and pouring into each other, that's something that goes a lot further than I think people think.
Girl, you teaching tonight, because I don't watch him. You know what I mean? Like I'm familiar with the brother, and then I need you to talk about these white men preying on you, girl. Listen, I have maybe had 2 white men in my entire life like try to really get at me, and I've like checked them, and that was it. Like, oh please, honey, oh you know what I'm saying? Like, and I think I said that. But tell me about your experience. How do they be preying on you, girl?
I want to share an experience first that happened when I was a kid. And I feel like this is, again, just going in how important. I want to underscore Black men and how important they are in terms of like as fathers. And again, like just uplifting that Black male role in your life. Because I remember when I was a kid, I was in Harlem. I grew up in Queens, New York. We went to Magic Johnson Theater. We're walking down the street. I was with my dad and I was with my younger brother. And I was walking, and I never forget that this white man was like, "Oh my God, you're so beautiful," to me. And my dad was like, "Don't say anything to her." Then he said, "What do you mean, man? I'm just saying she's beautiful." My father like let him know, "I just told you don't say anything. Don't make me have to bust you up." That's his phrase. But I said that to say that at that moment, I knew that it was inappropriate for a white man to speak to me in that type of way. But also the idea that him making those kind of flirtatious and probably sexual innuendo comments to me, I was 16 at the time. The idea that was also disrespectful to my father and my brother. It was disrespectful to the Black man. So again, part of actualizing that power as white men is to disrespect Black men, is to usurp their authority with things. So I said that to say that, experiencing that as a young woman, I was that ingrained a sense of something's not right about this. And I've noticed a lot of times when I'm by myself, I don't typically encounter that when I'm like with other Black people, and I am by myself a lot. But I say that to say, like, when I'm by myself, if I'm sitting in my car or if I'm going places or whatever, that's typically when they'll I'll say attack, because it's domestic terrorism to try to actualize white supremacy through a Black woman. So it's domestic terrorism. It's not hitting on her. So the idea that you'll see that when you're alone as a Black woman. Also, if you're in certain spaces, so I'm an Afrodemic. I do exist. I don't like using the word academy, but in those kind of spaces, a lot of times you may not see a lot of Black men. So they're also
true. They make sure Black men ain't in those spaces.
No. And a lot of times, unfortunately, some of them that are in those spaces, Tommy Curry or someone like that is a gem. You don't have like the Dr. Carrs and the Tommy Curry necessarily, or the Derek Bells, may he rest in peace. We don't see them in abundance in that way. So I say that to say that a lot of times a Black woman who's professional or something in a space, or maybe you haven't dated in a while, or you're finding it hard to date or interact with Black men or people that are not, I don't want to say systemized, but holding on to this kind of like white idea of masculinity, that are still working to renegotiate that, to go back to their kingdom or their status as kings. I think that's when you find Black women kind of being preyed on by these white men in those kind of moments where it looks like maybe you're not weak, but it looks like you're alone or you're by yourself. You're not part of a unit. So It's definitely, it's really problematic. But I would say if you're
now that you say that, the 2 times that I can think of, because I try not to remember shit like this. I had literally, while you was talking, I had to think of them. The 2 times that I can remember that a white man tried to get at me, I was alone. You're right. They never try to holler like if you in a group. Certainly not while I'm with my husband, but yeah, I was alone. You're right about that. They pounce, and to think, and I don't know like how many what their response is like from Black women, but they were like pretty bold.
It's very. I even had a white professor like even do some like get out of pocket and be very unprofessional and like an innuendo, like to touch me in private. I've had that before, like him do that at like, because mind you, it was in a public place. But the idea was a public place, but it was also like I was alone, like in the sense that I didn't have anyone else around. So I say this to say, and the thing is, you talk to the wrong Black person and they'll take this as a compliment. And they'll think like the idea of white men being attracted to you is a compliment, and they'll try to be in a position to kind of get that. Whereas the idea is it's not a compliment. So I would say in terms of warning other Black women in terms of what's going on, you get a lot of them that are fiending for that, for lack of a better word, fiending for that type of validation from white men, that they want to be, oh, why he didn't do this to me, or why he didn't try this to you. And sometimes if they see you as powerful or whatever, or they see you as doing that, I don't know if they misconstrue that, but that can become even more of a challenge. So the idea of I'm even trying to pursue a Black woman who seems like she likes Blackness. So I would say that, and I'm not saying Black women don't, travel or do things alone, just be conscious of that. And the idea of people, because even white people have been known to kind of always do things in groups anyway. They have a kind of understated cowardice that isn't really known. And that goes again with trying to actualize that power on you, trying to get you in that vulnerable moment.
Get you when you're vulnerable. They never got balls to holler at you when you're in a group, and certainly not when you with a Black man.
Definitely.
whether it's your brother, your husband, or whoever. But I've never had that happen while I was in the presence of a Black man, ever.
So it's very even though I've had in those two instances I've seen that, but I think also it's a way for them to see, like, again, a way for them to kind of challenge the Black man indirectly. So the idea that you seem like something's wrong with you if you beat them up or if you say something back to them, whereas the reality, it's like a stealth kind of undercurrent of them trying to actualize that. It's very problematic. I need the charger for my computer, so I'm gonna move.
Okay, yeah, no problem.
I can listen. I'm just yeah.
I know I had to do the same thing. I had my husband help me because I'm like, give me the charge, baby. Getting ready to go dead. I should have had it all set up before. But no, this is a really great conversation because this is something that I don't think I don't think I could have had this conversation with anybody else but you. Simply because I could see like what your thought process was through your writings, through your tweets and things like that. But yeah, definitely somebody, one of my friends, Brother Muhammad said, word to your father. And that's real. Like having a strong Black father as a Black girl means everything because like, you know what not to go for. Like you said, your dad like checked that white dude when you were young. And like you said, you knew that white man and you knew that was wrong.
Right. 100%. Right. Yes.
And that has stayed with you. So that's the importance of Black fathers. And I hate to see sisters who have been hurt, right? They've been hurt in a relationship with a Black man. And so have I. But one of the things that white people have done very well, particularly with feminism, is that they have taught Black women how to politicize their hurt feelings. Mm-hmm.
Right.
They have taught Black women to not only to politicize your hurt feelings, but make it a movement. Who ain't been hurt by a man, right? Like, I mean, relationships fail all the time. Why does that have to be a distinguishing factor of who Black men are globally? Because like I'm known like to be have a very strong stance in my love for Black men. Like I'm known for that. But I have a story to tell too, certainly, you know, with my first marriage. But I decide that relationship, because I know like the pain that he came from too. We came from somewhat similar childhoods in that we also had trauma from childhood. Mm-hmm. And like I packaged like that relationship is like that was a learning experience instead of, ooh, these niggas ain't shit or all these, you know what I mean? Like how you see a lot of Black women who are in a relationship who are rightfully hurt. Maybe there was some violence. Maybe there was a whole lot of stuff, right? But as Black people, this is why I love about Tommy Curry's work. But as like Black people, why are we not looking at this from a sociological lens? Why are we not looking at this, you know, from the stress that we live with, like, you know, the stress that we deal with at work, the stress that we have that we can't find a job, like all of these different things can be an explaining factor, right, for any type of dysfunction other than maleness or Black maleness. And that's what I don't like about a lot of sisters who politicize their hurt feelings.
I would say, and that's what I think with Dr. Watkins, who actually I actually took one of her courses before, so I'm, you know, I've been blessed, but she calls compulsory feminism, the idea of doing that, because I think, and that's something I think Black women, as you would say, it's been weaponized against us, because I don't see other groups doing that in terms of what's going on, even though the statistics are there in terms of for them to actually stand behind that. But I think the idea of, and that's one thing I would also say that's not universalized, like not universal, the whole heartbreak type thing. It's the idea of, no, if a Black man does that to you, he's terrible.
He's terrible, yeah.
The way they are and stuff. And the idea of glorifying like how supposedly they treat other women of other races, whereas the reality is that's not the narrative. And I think because understanding the complexities of what it means to be a Black person in America or anywhere really, but since we're in America, the idea of the complexities of what that means, that in itself is, I would say, going into that with empathy. And again, empathy is not excusing people for what they've done, but the idea of just looking at it that way. And I think that's another reason why I would say people sometimes look for people who aren't of African descent. It's an escapist tactic. You could barely handle the complexities of your own experience. You don't want to have to deal with somebody else's. And there's a courage that it takes to actually say, like, look, I'm taking on my experience and I'm taking on your experience, and we're going to work through this together. And everything is against us in terms of Black people, in terms of us coming together and actually being functional in terms of this environment. But we do it anyway. And that's something that doesn't get enough credit in terms of Black love is revolutionary, but it's also a testament that the forces that they've put in to break us as a people, it has not worked. They've tried it. It has not worked. And that's why you don't see functional Black couples out there. You see people being dysfunctional, or some people with things overtly wrong. Because if they actually show you, we've done everything to try to break these people up. We've done everything to make them too dysfunctional to love one another, but they did it anyway. It exposes the farce of white supremacy in the same way that we saw on January 6th.
Facts. No, that's real. And I really hate it. Like, back to, the whole topic here, like the whole hashtag of give white men a chance. Some of y'all sisters got Black daddies talking this BS that love y'all. Some of y'all got Black sons. I'm like, I look at some of these sisters that be talking that BS, and they got Black fathers, loving Black fathers. Some of them come from homes, because they'll post pictures of their dad. Oh, I love my dad. And I'll be so confused. And then some of them got Black sons. And like this whole idea of like, ooh, Harry did all of this, for her, and he did. And I'm just like, y'all ain't got no stories to tell. I said, why ain't nobody interviewed me about my loving relationship with my husband? Why ain't nobody interviewed no Black women who can say the same things about their Black spouses? You know what I mean? That's how you know there's a certain agenda being promoted, is because you don't hear from Black people or Black women who are in healthy relationships with Black men. You don't hear from them, like, at all. Their voices are our voices are erased. That's another thing that I honestly, you don't see it in Essence, that's supposed to cater to Black women. You don't see it in any kind of Black media or, Black media.
And that, to me, that's something that actually, I'm glad to hear you say that, because I think sometimes people get caught up in just like the glamour of marriage and relationships, that like they don't even realize the kind of like hidden agenda in that. Because there's definitely it's not, that's not.
It ain't all peaches and cream all the time.
No, definitely not.
Marriage is hard.
And that's something also that I feel like, I think that's something also I would say with social media culture and like Instagram and stuff like that, when you see people showcasing the kind of like, it's the storybook type of, again. So again, it's like framing by this white supremacist, putting it in this white supremacist narrative also. And that's, again, it's discounting the complexities of what it means to be Black in this country and what it actually means to love another Black person in terms of that. But how powerful would that be to show two Black people with healthy relationships with themselves that have merged to create a unit? How powerful would that be in terms of people seeing that, in terms of that being a dominant image? And I would push back on Beyonce and Jay-Z, because I know a lot of people will probably insert them into that, or the Obamas, because what you notice with those couples is that they've been neutered. They've been Americanized in a certain sense. Yeah. So even though they're physically Black, they're not really, I don't want to say they're not connected to the Black experience, because I don't know them as people, but in terms of their systemic function,
I know what you mean.
Working for the masses. They're not for Black people anymore.
Right.
What's going on. They're actually promoting, they're Black faces that are promoting a white agenda that's using the whole Black couple to do that. So even that, we have to be very careful with that also. And that's, again, with, I would push back, I really push back on slapping American on anything that's Black. And I think that that's important, again, to just kind of push back on those agendas, because once we start doing a whole American thing, then everybody's included in terms of that. And then we're not really looking at the agenda there, because those, I would actually say that, especially I would say the Obamas, that's like ammo against the Black community. And those are also fighting words. You say anything antagonistic, people either stop listening.
Girl, who? You better not say nothing about, especially Michelle. Ooh.
Oh, no. Of course not. Definitely not. It's
heresy. No, that's a good point that's a good point that you bring up about the Obamas and Beyonce and Jay-Z. That's an excellent point. In terms of, like I'm thinking about like our, paper media, whatever, that's Black supposedly and stuff like that. I'm thinking about them, and Essence. I don't think Essence. And it's supposed to be like the audience is supposed to be Black women, but I'm going to be honest with you. I don't get a lot from Essence, because it's very Eurocentric.
Definitely.
The promotion, yeah. How do you feel? Yeah. What's your thoughts on that?
No, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interject with you there, but I would say that I know Essence recently came back under Black ownership. So for a long time, it wasn't Black owned. So I believe the Shea Moisture guy is actually the Essence person now, like the first people behind it. And Shea Moisture.
Oh, he was pushed out. Did you see that?
Oh, well, I was
pushed out by Black women.
So, but he was problematic anyway. I feel like in terms of some of the change that we saw with Shea Moisture before his departure, like again, trying to market that in terms of market it to other groups. Same thing we saw as Carol's daughter. So again, something that starts out for us becomes for everybody, which means not for us anymore. But I would say Essence in terms of, because we do actually, the media is really powerful. And I think that people underestimate that in terms of that. I'm someone that, I mean, I study literature. And at one point, literature was the media. But now, in terms of everything that we see, in terms of like engaging the stuff in the media, that's so didactic. And it teaches you without you realizing that you're being taught things. So the idea of something that's projecting itself as Black media, how anti-Black it is. And I know somebody had quoted Amos Wilson in terms of like putting Black faces on white power. That's what we see on
That's right.
Everybody's Black on the cover, but the motives and that undercurrent is still white supremacist and white nationalists.
It's so true.
Imagine. And that's the problematic part. Even just looking at who's promoting what, or even now with the kind of like the fetish of promoting Black businesses, the idea is it's not about Black businesses, right? The economy's hurting. So it's another way to get you to support this struggling economy.
And Omar Wiley pointed that out earlier. I don't know if you saw his comment, and I even said it. I was like, "Oh, I hadn't thought about that," because I've been thinking. So, like, I have been watching this economy because part of it is, I'm telling on myself is I'm an investor. So I have been seeing this evolution of this fourth industrial revolution, right? Like this globalization 4.0. And I've also hosted Allison McDowell, who actually lives in Philadelphia. She's a white woman, but she has like researched this. She's an independent researcher. And I've had her on this channel several times to talk about like the financial part, like following the money, like Klaus Schwab, who wrote the book COVID-19 and the Great Reset and things like that. I got to be careful what I say so YouTube don't take down my channel because they be doing stuff too. But one of the things that I hadn't thought about is Omar Wiley said, and I need to go back up and look at his comment. It's been a minute now because there's been so many other comments. He said, but it's necessary. Let me go back and see. Where is that comment? He said it's necessary for them to manhood. Here it is. Manhood is a threat to the Great Reset, and Black manhood is a threat to the global economic status quo. And I was like, "Ooh, say more about that," because I hadn't thought about it in those terms. I mean, I know Tommy talks about that a little bit in terms of like when you see genocides that have happened, like when he studied genocides, men were targeted first. Like, so once you like eradicate them, you can control the women and children.
I guess that sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. What is that what you get from what Brother Omar Wiley is saying here? And by the way, he's like loving your comments. He like when you dropping a book, when you dropping a podcast, he wants you to just drop everything. So I'm gonna have you back on.
No, I definitely I know like Dr. Tommy Curry, as you mentioned, does actually talk about in terms of like the importance of Black masculinity in terms of like redefining it in terms of what it means. And I do think that's definitely a threat to the economy. I guess for me, just kind of to echo earlier points, the fact that genocide, I think, is also now really anchored in Black women, that's a notable shift also. Because I would even point to just kind of the white institution, just to kind of make, and I'm not trying to get off Brother Omar Wiley's point, but I did want to mention this too. Like I know like that Harvard class of 2010 pumped out a lot of Black women who have been very at the forefront of this last decade. So you have Mented Cosmetics with the Black lipstick I'm wearing right now, Black female lipstick. Both of them were met at Harvard's class. You have Abby Phillip, of course, the Black woman on CNN. She was Harvard 2010. And then you had like the For Harriet girl, Kimberly.
She went to Harvard too?
Yeah, she wasn't in that class.
Hate Black man.
But I say that to say it's interesting that, again, you have like the white institution pumping out prominent Black female voices. And again, that these are Black women. This is not like Black men, I guess, in terms of like you had like Du Bois and you had other Black men in the past in the 20th century that were like the forefront of Black leaders in the from the white university. Now you're seeing Black women, and in terms of franchisement or economy, you're seeing them like with businesses, but then you're also seeing them in terms of at the voice or at the top of these white networks, which is not accidental either in terms of that.
It's not.
I definitely want to.
I pointed that out the other day. Like, there's a lot of. Did you see that a Black woman has just been appointed to the helm at MSNBC?
I definitely saw that too. So again, and they made a big deal of that. Like, this is progress. Yep. One, because we're getting people trying to check multiple boxes, right? So now it's like you get a Black woman, so she's Black, she's a woman, and she's LGBT. They're able to check these 3 boxes. So they're trying to check boxes and making it seem like a certain way. But I also think that appointing a Black woman to these kind of positions to implement these white nationalist ideas is also an attack on a Black man and Black family also. So very, very similar to the Omawali point also, because there's something to be said about all these Black women being pushed up into kind of being the voice of these things, and also pushed up this socioeconomic stance also because they're making money. I know you mentioned
they're making a lot of money. Them sisters, like I don't know what CNN pay, but I'm sure she comfortably way up high in the 6 figures.
100%. And the idea of this is specifically demonstrated towards the millennial woman also. So the idea this millennial Black woman is being placed in this kind of position, and that's something that is not lost on me, and it's very troubling, especially Harvard's kind of history of anti-Blackness, and the academy. Right. The fact that they're literally built on the Blacks of enslaved Black people, and they're still working to socially reproduce that anti-Black ideology.
It's so true. That's funny you really honed in on the class of 2010. I hadn't thought about that. But you're right. A lot of these Black women have gone through these white PWIs, like these white institutions. And I can't imagine how anti-Black Harvard is. Like, I mean, shit. Like, of course, Stanford and you also know, like, a lot of these universities, especially these elite universities, were also participants with eugenics. Like, they house eugenics science in their universities.
I know Craig Wilder's Ebony and Ivy, he talks about the links of the American college to enslavement, and also like about overseas also, and the idea that that's what they were teaching. They were teaching white men how to actualize their power, but also the idea that what they were being taught was the biological difference between themselves and Black people. So they were factualizing the fiction of racial mythos in those academies, and the idea that that's the same thing you become a part of. And the reality is you don't have to go to a PWI to be indoctrinated in those kind of beliefs, because even if you notice, Black women who go to these PWIs, they usually come out with this kind of espousal to compulsory feminism, to use Dr. Watkins' term.
True.
They're not taught about African and womanism. They're not taught about that. No. They're taught like, look, hold on to feminism, and the idea then you're a Black feminist, which is basically very similar to like the whole Black American oxymoron type of thing also. That's what they're producing. So the idea is, when you see Black women, I know for me, when I see you coming out of those Ivy League or schools, you pretty much know what's going on. They're physically Black, but their mind, they have a processed mind. So they used to talk about the
mind, the lobotomy has been completed. Yes. Okay, like, get out, straight out.
Exactly.
Yeah, but I will say very few Black women come out of there and keep their Black mind. And I had an opportunity to work with one, my good friend. She passed away last year in September from cancer. And I actually told her this to her face. I said, you, sister, are one of the few Black women that kept your natural Black mind after getting your law degree from Harvard. And she just cracked up. You know, like, she was like, I know what you mean. But like, she was still very Black. And I said, how did you do it? And her experience was like mine. She said, I came from a real Black family. Like, I didn't go to no suburban schools. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so she was, I want to know, like, the sisters that do end up like that, I feel like they also went to suburban schools or private schools. Like, their K through 12 was white too. Like, I feel like sisters that go through Harvard, maybe not all of them, but if they go through Harvard and like the lobotomy is completed and all of that, they probably came from upwardly middle class Black families where they had a white experience their entire time. Because that's the other thing, like my co-founder of my organization, love her to death. One of the things that she did as soon as she got like her law degree and started like moving up the ladder, she moved to a white neighborhood and put her children in white schools.
That's that American mythos narrative. But I would say that in terms of from what I would also say that I do think there's a difference between going to a PWI as an undergraduate and a graduate student, because I would say that, and this is something I would definitely
talk about that, yeah.
Because I would say that I went to an HBCU for my bachelor's, and I went to I went to a PWI, a women's college, to get my master's degree. But I would say that the idea of, and this is also something that separates me from a lot of other Black people that I knew, that's still a very formal time in your life when you're 18 years old, 18 to 22. True. That's very foundational. You're very young. So to be that exposed to white people and white institution at that time, that's something I think is hard to shake off. In the same way that growing up in white areas is hard to shake off also. But I would also say a lot of the times going to, because I don't think the Black women that I mentioned, they don't come from upper middle class backgrounds. And I think that's the idea of making it out of these kind of areas or out of these type of environments to get to those type of schools. So
Abby Phillips doesn't?
I don't think
that was just an assumption. Yeah.
I don't know. I know she's a migrant. Her parents are migrants. So I think that in terms of
she's an immigrant. Lord have mercy. Don't get ADOS on here. What they at on Wally?
She's from Baltimore.
ADOS get ready to go off. They gonna be like, oh yeah, them the ones that get all the positions. Ain't no descendants of enslaved Africans getting these positions. They all from Jamaica. They all from the continent. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I don't think that but at the same time, I the idea that you don't really, and I guess this is going against what Langston Hughes talks about in like the Negro Artist and Racial Mountain, the idea that you don't necessarily have to be in a certain class to be indoctrinated in anti-Black ideas, or thinking that
it's real.
Or thinking the idea of being like, if that's the dream, because I could even see you maybe putting that on a higher pedestal, the further are you from Harvard, the idea that you see it higher, the further it is from your view. But I said that to say that I definitely don't think pro-Blackness leads you to those PWIs. It definitely doesn't. In terms of that anyway. And I would say that it's very hard to maintain who you are. But I will say that it can push you to understand what Blackness is, because you see racism up close. Because when I was like mid-20s when I went to get my master's degree. This was my first time being around white people, like ever, like up close and everything. So I'm seeing that kind of the mythos of white people, like they project like they're Jack Dawson from Titanic, but then you get up close
hilarious.
And very Billy Zane. So I say that to say it can push you to be
hilarious.
It can push you to be very Malcolm X in a certain type of way. So I'm not saying that that's because I think, and also going back to Candace Owens, the idea that they could scare you into submission, the idea in a certain way, or it could scare you into your Black nationalism also. So that again, I think.
Or everybody has a price. Sometimes they can be like, I got a check and it's got this many zeros on it. What you want to do?
Steve Harvey with the whole monkey joke. The idea that he's willing to sell out to play a monkey for this right price. And that's problematic also, of course, when you think about auction block culture. The idea of like socially reproducing that anyway. We shouldn't have a price. The idea if you shouldn't be able to be bought by anything.
Ain't that the truth?
Have you noticed though also that everybody that puts unbought is bought? Everybody that you're seeing in terms of like on these social media platforms.
Everybody that does what? You kind of broke up a little.
Sorry. Everybody that's saying, I'm unbought or I'm unsomething, they're usually bought and sold. I'm thinking specifically of a certain commentator that appears a lot in terms of Black woman voice, unbought. Typically, they're bought with that kind of caption. Did you hear that I break up?
I'm so sorry, girl. You are breaking up for me. Is she breaking up for anybody else or just me? Apparently, Wally can hear you because he put fire things in the comment. I don't know what happened. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now, yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Hello? I don't know.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Can you repeat what you said? I couldn't hear you. I'm sorry.
I was just saying the idea that I've noticed a trend of certain.
Apparently the audience could hear you. I just couldn't hear you.
I don't know. I'm sorry about that. I don't know if it's something I'm doing, but I was just saying that I noticed that there's a pattern of very popular Black female voices on social media writing the unbought in there, but they're usually the ones bought and sold already by the time we see that. So it's I just find that very ironic, but I just think that that's part of stepping into kind of a Black nationalist or Black self-love. They should not be able to buy you, no salary, no lifestyle, no visibility, because attention is a commerce in itself in this type of environment that we live in. So the idea is I think a lot of these people that are getting attention are very underpaid. They just want people to see them. They just want followers. They want likes. They want to feel, because even now it doesn't even have to be intelligent. It just has to be popular. And that's being bought too. If getting likes or getting attention is getting you to act a certain way, which is what happened with Candace Owens, that fueled her. And I still think it's Black response.
It's so true.
It's the same thing. Because not trying to be mean, but I'm not, and I know this is like a petty comment, but the reason why I kind of pushed back on her being well paid is for a long time they had her looking very unpolished in terms of delivering that self-hatred rhetoric. She's not polished, she's not put together, she's looking in a way that would make white people comfortable. The idea that you're not too polished in terms of the way that you're presenting yourself, but she's getting paid in attention. She's getting retweets, she's getting hate mail, she's getting all this type of stuff. So the idea, the commerce of that, we need to not make sure that we're not being bought by that, but also that we're not buying into that, because she would not be who she is if we were not talking about her.
Yeah, that's mic drop worthy right there. But it's real. You know, it's real. That's funny. You said they got unbought in their bios and shit, but they're very bought.
Yes.
That's funny. That's hilarious. Somebody said, Young King said, I'd rather die than be a sellout. Yes. Yeah, that's real. No, this has been great, sister girl. We almost at hour 2, and I actually just planned on doing an hour, but this was so good. No, seriously, no, like this was so good. I wanted to keep going because the audience have been like, I don't know if you noticed, but the audience has been very engaged. They have like really enjoyed you specifically and everything that you have brought to the table. So I would love for you to be able to come back. But I knew I had to talk about this with you just from what I've read, like from your blogs and like following you on Twitter. I'm like, this sister is like my mirror. Like she writes what I feel, like, because I don't have time to write as much as I want, but you write like what I feel. This has been very good. But yeah, let's kind of wrap up, because like I said, we're almost at hour 2. We can go 10 more minutes to round it out at 2 hours. But what are some final thoughts you'd like to share, you know, with the audience? I definitely want to bring you back for sure.
Definitely. Well, I just really want to thank you. First, I'm sorry I was late, but I just really want to thank you for just having me and just giving me an opportunity to talk. Like I don't really get a chance to have conversations like this at all, like, to be really honest. So thank you so much for your platform. Thank you so much for, you know, enlightening me and for sharing your perspective on me. And to anybody who's watching, thank you so much for engaging. Like, this is really, I know Twitter is like a white supremacist platform, but I do feel like I've been able to connect with people.
No, I got your Twitter handle, so people are definitely going to be following you. Your following is going up from watching this, trust. So I've been having it rolling down at the bottom the whole time, so people can follow you.
But thank you so much for this platform, because the sense of community, we really need that, in a sense of like just being able to talk to each other and just kind of open up about your experience. And I just enjoy you, and it's nice to meet you also.
It's nice to meet you too. Listen, it's hard to find other Black women that think like me. So many of these sisters see the bag with being a feminist. I have to tell this story before we get off, though. Like I mentioned earlier, like I am an activist, and I'm in the professional world of activism in like the nonprofit world. And I had applied for this national position. Like I got into this work very organically, like through my own experience being a Black mother of a Black son. And so that experience led to me founding my own nonprofit, right? That my husband leads now while I work at this national organization that I'm with now. But I applied for another national position, and I ended up getting the position and working at the position for 3 years before I left. And now I'm in this new role. And girl, can I tell you how white women did me? This is how I know, like, the nonprofit industrial complex, especially when white women are in control. If you're not a Black woman who identifies clearly as a feminist, you don't have no job in the movement.
No.
And when I was going through the interview process, I was shocked because the interviewing committee was mostly of Black women, but the white woman who was like spearheading the whole thing, and she was actually on staff at the nonprofit that I was applying for, she said, I'm not sure about Zakia. I'm not comfortable with hiring her because she has such a strong stance on Black men.
That's pervasive, and you hear that a lot from Black. Because I had a.
But she was comfortable saying that to Black women.
Yes,
but what she didn't know. Let me finish though real quick. What she didn't know Well, she was talking to black women from Mississippi. She was talking to black women from New Orleans. She was talking to black women from North Carolina. And they were older black women. They weren't millennials. These are old school black women who were on the coordinating committee. And they told her how she was shocked with the response. Like, you racist bitch. Like, what? Like, why would you feel comfortable saying that to us? And they defended me. And they was like, do know why she got into this work, right? Like, they had to remind them, like, it ain't about you, it's about the work. We are doing work to end the school to prison pipeline, which disproportionately impacts black boys. So what are you talking about? She got into this work because of her son. Like, they had to, like, really, and so of course I ended up getting hired, but like, we had to go through this whole process. Like, even after I got hired, they made them go through a whole process, and like, it was a bunch of white women tears and a bunch of stuff. But it was amazing being at that organization for 3 years, and like, their cover was off. I knew that I know who you are. You know what I'm saying? And I never stopped being myself. You think I'm going to change who I am because you scared that I have such a strong black identity? And I say oftentimes all over my social media, I don't identify as a feminist. They were literally scared of working with me. Scared. Because I didn't have a white affect, that I wasn't white, that I wasn't going to take care of white feelings. That's not who I am. And it was a very interesting 3 years.
Thank you for sharing that story, because I feel like that's not said enough in terms of like the cost. I feel like of black women existing in those spaces, that you're expected to kind of shed your blackness and affiliation to black. So I definitely had a professor tell me that before too. I wrote an essay which basically was like giving an alternative perspective on Bill Cosby, and she's basically saying, "Oh, I see you as like a black feminist, and when you say things like that, people aren't going to, take you seriously." And the idea of your experience, it shows that you don't have to sell out, because a lot of people think if you it's either like you, I guess, like live in a cardboard box or like don't do anything, you could still be yourself and get somewhere in this world. And guess what? You're going to have the respect. People may not like you, and that's not important anyway, but you're going to get the respect. You may get your foot in the door being a sellout, but nobody's ever going to respect you. And when they get a chance to drop you, they will. Selling out, let me tell you, is going to have her Stacey Dash moment. I give it 10 years or so.
They gonna drop her as soon as they done with her. And the same thing gonna happen on the liberal side. As soon as they finish with y'all, they gonna drop you, and the money gonna be gone. That's why I never want to be dependent. You see what I'm saying? I never want that.
Exactly. So thanks for sharing your story. Because so many people are saying that, I want to make something. You could make something and be yourself. That's the only way. Again, that's still selling out. If you got to tuck who you are, that's still selling out. You're still selling out for that salary. So thank you for that means so much, like in terms of just doing that, because you can make it and be black and proud person. You can do that. It's possible.
Yeah, you can. It takes a lot of strategy, and it was a lot of strategy. Like, I can tell you the entire story offline, but if it wasn't for those Southern black women, right, who were not millennials, these were black women, like I said, Mississippi, right? These were black women who been through some stuff. You feel me? Right. And for you to say that you against black men, these are black women who love black men. These were mothers, grandmothers, got black sons. You know what I mean? Some of them married to black men. That you will be comfortable in saying that. She literally said she has such a strong affect towards black men and thought it was okay.
That community is
Since important. When did that become a reason not to hire somebody?
I just want to say, in terms of a lot of people, they're gonna find themselves standing alone.
But to me, also, I tell that story so that you know that the nonprofit industrial complex, the vast majority of the sisters who get hired in these really high positions, you got to know who they are.
Exactly. 100%.
Yeah, you got to know who they are. This was great though. I'm so glad we had this conversation. I couldn't have had this conversation with nobody else. I'm serious.
So much. I really appreciate it.
Because I think it matters that we're two black women. I I don't think I could have had this conversations with another Black woman, not at least I mean, you know, like in my immediate circle. I know of the Black women who are very much, you know, Black identified and all of that. But like to really be able to have this conversation at the intellectual level that we have had and the intellectual capacity that you have brought to this conversation, girl, everybody loving you in the comments. You know what I'm saying? So this has been very impactful and meaningful for me, and I appreciate you, and I appreciate this entire conversation. But we are at 2 hours, so good night, everybody. You will see us next. We'll see Real Talk with ZSJ, same place, same time, Thursdays at 8 p.m. Remember that. Next week, I am hosting Brother Davon Love from the organization that I mentioned earlier, Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle. We're going to talk about these Maryland Democrats. Woo, we're going to get into some politics. So thanks so much, everybody, for being in the comments, being very much a part of the conversation. Thanks so much to my guest, Kat. You were amazing. Thank you for joining. You definitely have a place on this platform. If you just ever just get it, it's like, girl, I don't feel like writing. Can we talk about this? Hit me up. You know how to get in contact with me, and we will surely, even if it ain't on Thursday, like I have off conversations all the time. People will be like, I want to come on your platform, and I think this is very important. I want to talk about this. I do that all the time. I did that last Sunday. If I got the time and my husband got my back and he got the kids, I can make it happen. Thank you so much, sister. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Bye-bye.